Hey guys, welcome back to Becca Does Stuff. I've gotten a couple of requests from you guys to do a beeswax wrap video, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. You may have seen in my bedroom closet declutter video, I had some blue organic cotton sheets that had gotten torn up from the dogs, and so I washed those and decided to cut those up and turn those into beeswax wraps since they're the perfect material. I had tried to do some beeswax wrap refreshes, but I actually haven't tried to make them from scratch. So this is actually my first time doing them from scratch. Through my searches on Skillshare, YouTube, and just all over the internet, it seems like the general consensus is that the double boiler method works. So I hope that this video is helpful and educational. I am learning myself, so I don't know how good they're gonna turn out, but you'll just have to wait and see. I decided to start by trying the iron method, even though the double boiler method seems to work best for most. The iron method is pretty simple. Just lay down a towel or something you don't mind ruining to catch any potential wax spillage. Then lay down parchment paper or silicone baking mat and put your cloth on top. Then evenly sprinkle the beeswax pellets or shavings. If you wanted to add pine resin and jojoba oil, you would sprinkle them on as evenly as possible at this point also. Then cover the cloth with another piece of parchment paper, set your iron to a low cotton setting, and iron until you see that it has all melted. I knew the risk, but I grabbed this towel to iron my beeswax wraps on, and I knew that some would possibly leak over the edge, and it did. But yeah, there's wax on the towel, so that's ruined, but that's no big deal. However, I tried the double boiler method, and that was a huge fail. The mason jar that I used to put the resin in, the bottom, it just fell right clean out. So I guess maybe it was a temperature thing. Actually, I'm sure that's what happened, and I know better. But anyway, so that destroyed my pot. There's a bunch of resin now stuck to the bottom of my stainless steel pot. It sucks because it's a good pot, or it was, but I'm thinking that I will do like this other lady that I saw on YouTube. She has a pot that she uses just for making her beeswax wraps. I guess that pot is gonna be used for that now. Now I'm just trying to melt out some of that resin so that I can remove any potential glass that was in there, which I don't think there was any, but I also wanted to make sure that I had the right measurements when I'm redoing this recipe, and I want to make sure the ratios are correct. Okay, so the pine resin was starting to smoke a little bit. I went ahead and turned on the vent on the microwave to try to suck some of it out, but I'm just a little concerned about like when certain things reach a smoking point, the toxicity potential of it. So I didn't want to risk it. And I didn't make a ton of progress. I saved a can and just started scraping off the large bits in there that I could. I looked for different recipes to try for refreshing beeswax wraps and making them from scratch. I have a Skillshare account and thought, you know what? Let me check on Skillshare to see if there's any classes for that. Sure enough, I found 3 of them. And I'm going to try this one that calls for 2 tablespoons of jojoba oil, 1 cup of beeswax to 1/4 cup of pine resin. And it says to do it in a double boiler, but I don't really have that going on right here, so it's just gonna happen straight in the pot. It says that you're gonna need a baking tray, parchment paper, a paintbrush, which I would recommend getting a food grade one. Like a lot of people just say a paintbrush, and they're not all made equally, so I got a pastry brush. But before I got that, I was using one of my extra silicone basting brushes, and see how it clumps up like that? But with heat, that'll unclump, and I actually heard from somebody else that this is the best way to go, that it's hard to unclump these ones, so we'll see what works best. Okay, so you need your measuring cups and measuring spoon, 100% cotton cloth, scissors, which a lot of people use pinking shears so that it doesn't fray like this one did over time that I cut up. So pinking shears is preferable, but not necessary. tape measure or measuring tape, however you say it. I ended up just using like a box lid and a plate and just traced around that. And then to trace around it, you can use chalk or wax pencils. That seem to work well too. It says that you need drying racks, but I don't think that's necessary. Some people put clothespins on the corners of the beeswax when it's done and just go like this. I do it just with my hands. I have also taken this cord and like rigged it up in my kitchen so that it goes across the cabinets like this, and I hang it over there to dry. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. And this was measuring by centimeters. So it said this was to make some cloths that are 18 by 18 centimeters, 26 by 28 centimeters, and 26 by 36 centimeters. I just kind of made my own sizes. I don't think there's an exact science to it, honestly. I mean, if it looks like you need to make more, then you make more, but I just made some the basic size that you would see them in to cover a bowl or a piece of fruit or whatever you use them for. They also recommend washing your cloth, and she also recommended ironing it to get the creases out. So I think I might give these a quick iron, and then I will start putting everything in my single boiler. So I'm gonna do 2 tablespoons of jojoba oil, 1 cup of beeswax, and 1/4 cup of tree resin. I did hear on some videos online that you should put the resin in first, let that melt down, and then add the beeswax and the jojoba oil. They actually say to add the beeswax last. And the reason why they say to do that is because beeswax has a very low smoke point. It melts very quick and easily, so you don't want it getting too hot in there while you're waiting for the resin to melt. But then the videos that I saw on Skillshare, they just threw everything all in at once and it seemed to be fine. I did also see some videos on there where they were taking beeswax pellets like I have here. They highly recommend pellets because they're easier to distribute. And if you have a beeswax block, there's nothing wrong with that, but then you have to get a shredder or a vegetable peeler or whatever to make it into small shavings, and that can kind of be a pain in the butt. Unless you are using the double boiler method, then you could just take a knife and chop off a few pieces, throw it in there and melt it like that. I've seen it that way too. But if you're trying to do the iron method, it's gonna be harder to do if you don't have little pellets or little shavings. Yeah, let me iron out a couple of my sheets here, and I will also add in the ingredients to my pot and make sure it melts all nicely. Okay, so let's get to it. Also, I wanted to show you that the beeswax wrap that I tried to make by myself that was just using beeswax, it has no resin or jojoba oil. It doesn't stay. You can already see it starting to unfold. We'll use this as an example. You can see it's already starting to sit loose, like it's barely on there. It's just resting, but it's not really sticking to it. Beeswax alone is not gonna work for me, and I would recommend spending a little extra money and getting the resin and the jojoba oil. This is another one that I tried to refresh using jojoba oil and pine resin and beeswax all together to sprinkle on here. I don't know if you can tell right there. It's like the pine resin didn't distribute evenly, and it ended up just making these spots that are really crispy. And I heard that if you get those crunchy, crispy spots like that, to add more jojoba oil and it'll help distribute it. Well, that still didn't work for me. So now it looks very stained up. It looks all splotchy. One lady recommended taking the pine resin if you're doing the iron method, you sprinkle on the beeswax and then you take the pine resin and go like this with your fingers and just do little sprinkles all over and try to get it ground down with your fingers as fine as possible, because pine resin tends to clump up like this. But it seems like always the double boiler method was the best solution, because you're just melting all the ingredients together, you're mixing it up really well, so they're just all blended together and you can evenly coat your wrap. So I think that's probably the method that I'm gonna end up using going forward. It is a little more time consuming. You have to heat it up on the stove,
which can take a while to get everything melted down and evenly distributed, and you have to have it the right consistency. I think it has to be pretty liquidy. And after you coat your wax wrap with it, you then have to bake it to make sure that it's still evenly distributed, I guess, and then you take it out of the oven and hang it up.
It's a little more time consuming, a little more work, but it's gonna produce a better product. I guess it's worth it. I ironed these, and I am going to turn on my stovetop. I'm gonna start at like a medium low. My tablespoon and my measuring cup. So I'm gonna start with the resin. It says 1/4 cup of pine resin. This is a half a cup, so I'm gonna do half of that. And then after I'm done making these, I would like to try to refresh these ones. I don't feel like I should have to keep like composting these or throwing them out. I had some that were pretty bad and I just cut them up and composted them. And I don't think that you should have to do that. Like I feel like these should last for a really long time, like years. So I shouldn't have to keep making these, but I figured it'd be cool to try to make some of my own just so I know how. I take mine and I fold them in half like this and I just stick them in my drawer. But one of the gals that I watched on Skillshare recommended not folding them and storing them flat, or rolling them like this and then tying a twine around them. And that way it won't make all these little fold creases. I'll point the camera down here because you don't need to stare at me. Probably want to see what's happening in the pot. Just some little tips while we're waiting for this to melt. They do recommend that when you put these on a baking sheet, that you make sure that your parchment paper covers all the edges. So you want to make sure there's plenty of room around the edge of the pan so that you can allow room for a little bit of dripping and spillage so that it's not ruining your cookie sheet. And it won't necessarily ruin it. Boiling water will take all of this stuff off, and you could dump boiling water on your cookie sheet too. I just don't know what I would do with the boiling water after dumping it in here and rinsing this out. I don't feel like it should go down the drain. I will think about that. Maybe after today, maybe I will boil some water in here and see if I can clean it out real good. Oh, you can also use the same piece of parchment paper over and over. Just keep one side the messy side and one side the clean side. Fold it up and store it away somewhere when you're not using it. There's a little bit of smoke coming off this, so I'm going to turn the heat down a little. This still has a bunch of wax on it, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this off because that might be too much wax. I have a little container that I saved old wax and resin in from previous refreshes. Now, another tip that they gave is that if there's too much wax on your wrap, if you realize that you just put it on too heavily, that's okay. You can go ahead and lay a cloth underneath of it, one that you're gonna make a wax wrap out of but has nothing on it yet. Put the clean one down, the one that doesn't have any wax on it, down on the parchment paper, and then put the one that's saturated in wax on top of it, and then when you put it in the oven, the bottom one will soak up the excess. I just realized I need to move my camera again so I can take my pizza stone out of here. Looks like this is very liquidy, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop warming this. I turned off the heat, and let's start with a round one, shall we? So I'm gonna lay that on here. Nobody has ever said to just pour it on there, but that's what I'm doing because I'm impatient. See, my pastry brush is unclamped. But you know what? I want to try this one. Oh, this seems to give a lot more coverage, but it's very streaky too. You can see it's cooling pretty fast. They say to work quickly with this. And I don't think I'm going fast enough because it cools very quickly and it doesn't spread as evenly when it's cool. So I better pick up the pace. That seems like it's too much wax. This said to do it at, for 1 to 2 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius. That seems like a lot. The other one said 110 Celsius. Okay, most of them said to do the oven 110 degrees Celsius, which is 230 Fahrenheit. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my oven on bake, down to 230. And it says to leave it in for like 3 to 5 minutes. I feel like I went a little heavy on the wax. That's okay, because like I said, we can put another one of these right underneath of it, and this will soak up the excess. So bake it for like 2 to 5 minutes, take it out, and then you're gonna have to take your pastry brush and rebrush it to make sure that everything's evenly distributed, and you may have to add a little bit more or soak a little bit of it up. We will see how it turns out. Fingers crossed. I'm really excited. I hope that these come out good. After I'm done with these, I want to do some refreshes too, just to see if I can bring some life back to these bad boys. But I don't have a whole lot of time because my honey and I are actually supposed to go thrifting for a few items in our house today. And then we're going to see a movie because it's our anniversary. And I just hope that the thrifting gods are with us today and help us find what we're looking for. Let me check on the beeswax wraps and see how they're doing. Can you see how much is pulling up on there? Oh my God, this brush is hard. Maybe if I can just brush some of that away. Yes, that's a decent size. Yeah. Yeah, that soaked up a lot of the excess wax. And now I have to work quick. Can you see those spots? I don't know if that's pine resin. Is that going to be an issue? It just might not be the prettiest looking. This is probably why people usually use patterned materials, but you know what? I had just plain blue, and that's okay with me. So now we just fan it like this to let it cool down and stiffen up. You can already tell it's starting to get stiff. And this already got solid too. It still seems like maybe there's too much. I don't know if you can tell, but there's some spots that look dull and some spots that look shiny. And that tells me that I think it's going to crack in those spots. Should we give it the crinkle test? Oh, no cracking. It didn't crack. Wow. Do the apple test. Oh, it looks like it's staying pretty well. Not bad, not bad. I feel like maybe I could use a little bit more stickiness to it, which would be the pine resin, which is surprising because you'd think that I would have too much pine resin, if anything, because I had some residue left in my pot from my little boo-boo. But you know what? Wow. No, this is sticking pretty good. Okay, so this is a good recipe. And again, I got this recipe on Skillshare. This recipe was by Open Hands Creative, Morgan and Jordan. Yeah, if anybody has Skillshare, go check them out because I feel like this worked pretty well. Let's heat this back up so I can evenly coat this one and make my other wax wraps. So it seems like, let me move that back so I'm not all up in your face. Oh no, I'm getting wax on my camera gear. It seems like it's easy to do too much wax. So I would say go lighter and then add more if you feel like you need more. And now I think I am going to try to refresh some of my old ones. They say you can refresh them just by putting them in the oven and just letting the wax melt around. And they also say you can refresh them by just adding a little bit of beeswax. I'm not worried about getting complete even coverage because I think when it melts in the oven, I'll pull it out, it'll be kind of melty, and then I will run the brush around on it, try to make it even. Let's see how it comes out, see if I need to add more or not. I have some friends that really don't care for beeswax wraps. Some people love them, some people hate them. I can understand why somebody would not want to bother with them. I personally like them, but the maintenance, I guess maybe if you get a hang of it, maybe the maintenance isn't so bad, but considering for what a simple little thing it is, you wouldn't think that you'd want to put a ton of work into it. We're gonna do the little bowl test. This is just with beeswax. I don't know what all the seller used, I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was jojoba oil, tree resin, and wax. And yeah, that's holding really well. So that worked out perfect. And that's it for the beeswax wraps. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was entertaining, educational, and helpful to you. If any of you make your own beeswax wraps, please let me know in the comments below what tips or tricks you have and what method you use. I would love to know. And until next time, take really good care of yourselves, guys. Thanks. Bye.